Welcome back. You're on 7:31 a.m. I didn't hear the whisper from across the room. I heard it right beside my ear. Why did you take him? I was frozen. The only thing in the dark was the stuffed bear, small, dirty, and sitting on my bed, where I never put it. I'm sending this to 7:31 a.m. because I need to know if someone else out there has seen what I've seen, heard what I've heard. This wasn't a haunted house. There were no shadows, no slamming doors, just a child's toy, one my daughter found at a graveyard, and something followed it home. We were at the cemetery to visit my grandmother. Nothing unusual about that. My daughter always liked going with me. She never seemed afraid of the headstones or the quiet. She'd pick little flowers from the grass and place them on markers that looked forgotten. She's always had that kind of heart. That day she wandered a few rows down while I stood by the grave, and when I turned to call her, she was already running back, smiling, arms wrapped around something small and worn. It was a teddy bear, old matted fur, one ear drooping, the kind of toy that had clearly been outside for a long time. "Can I keep him, Mommy?" she asked, hugging it to her chest. He was just lying there all alone. I hesitated. It had been near a small headstone, off to the side. A child's grave. I recognized the size of it, but I didn't want to scare her. Maybe someone had left it there and forgotten, or maybe the wind had moved it. It didn't seem like something worth making a big deal over, so I said yes. That night I tucked her in like always. She cradled the bear close, smiling sleepily. As I pulled the blanket over her, I noticed the bear had one of those voice boxes in its chest, the kind you press, and it says a phrase or sings a lullaby. I pressed it once out of curiosity. Nothing, no sound. Probably broken. The battery might have corroded long ago. I left it at that. She fell asleep holding it, and I went to my own room. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing was cold or heavy or strange. It was just a toy she found by a grave. And sometimes, that's how it begins. I woke up around 3 a.m. that night to a faint sound, like static, or maybe a voice too low to make out. It was coming from down the hall, from my daughter's room. I sat up, listened for a moment, trying to decide if I'd dreamed it. Then I heard it again. A whisper, garbled, short, like something mechanical trying to speak through water. I got up, heart beginning to thump, and went to her room. She was sound asleep. The room was dark and still. The bear was beside her, one small arm tucked under her chin. Everything looked normal. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft click, and then that distorted whisper again. It came from the bear. I froze. I'd tested the button earlier. It hadn't worked. I stepped back, picked it up gently, and pressed the chest again. Nothing. Just silence. I put it back down slowly and left the room, trying to tell myself it was a delayed sound. Old wiring, corroded batteries, maybe something heating up and triggering the speaker. I didn't believe it, but I needed to. The next night it happened again, only this time the sound was longer. Not quite a word, not quite a cry. Just a low moan that trailed into static. My daughter didn't stir. She slept like nothing was wrong. I didn't. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, trying to ignore the cold that had started to settle in the room. It wasn't the usual kind of night chill. It felt wet, like damp air after rain, the kind of cold that sinks into your clothes. I closed the window, checked for drafts, but the smell hit me next. Damp earth, fresh soil. It clung to the fabric of the curtains. It seemed to hang beneath the bed. I looked at the bear again, and it was different. It was still lying beside her. But something about the angle had changed. Its head was turned slightly, toward the door, toward me. I didn't touch it. I just walked back to my room and closed the door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the sound it made wasn't random. It was trying to say something. By the third night, I stopped waiting to be woken up. I stayed up instead, lights off back against the headboard, listening. Around 2:30, the house went still, that strange, expectant stillness, like everything was holding its breath. and then I felt it again, that weight in the air, like something was present, but not moving. Not yet. I got up and stepped quietly into the hallway. My daughter's door was cracked open just as I'd left it. I could hear her breathing, soft and steady, but the bear wasn't in bed with her. It was sitting in the center of the room, upright, balanced, facing the doorway. I stood there for what felt like forever, not moving. I didn't want to wake her. I didn't want to step inside. I just stared at the bear, and it stared back, even without eyes that could see. Eventually, I convinced myself she'd moved it in her sleep, maybe kicked it off the bed. I leaned in, picked it up, and gently placed it back beside her. It didn't make a sound, no click, no whisper, just silence. But the next night, it was worse. I woke up in the dark, no noise, no dream, just that feeling again, like I wasn't alone in the room. I rolled over slowly, half expecting to see something by the door, but it wasn't at the door. It was in my bed. The bear, lying there, inches from my face. I sat up fast, pulse hammering. I grabbed it and placed it on the floor, not rough, but firm. I needed distance. My hands were shaking. I didn't hear anything for a long time after that, maybe half an hour, and then, from the far end of the hall, click. That unmistakable sound of a plastic button being pressed, soft, slow, and very intentional. A burst of static followed, then a voice, not loud, not clear, just the faintest whisper, warped and struggling to form shape. It didn't say a name, it asked a question, right behind me, almost against my ear. "Why did you take him?" I didn't scream, I didn't run. I just sat there, frozen, fists clenched around the sheets, staring at the doorway like something might be standing just beyond it. But there was nothing, just the dark, and the weight of that question still echoing in my head. "Why did you take him?" I didn't sleep again after that. I kept the hallway light on, checked my daughter's room every hour. The bear was back in her bed by morning, curled into her arms like nothing had happened, like it had never moved. I wanted to get rid of it. I really did. But every time I thought about taking it away, I looked at her face while she slept. Calm, peaceful. Like she was being guarded, like it was keeping her safe, or keeping something else out, or in. I've tried hiding it. Once I locked it in a box in the closet, just to see what would happen. That night she woke up screaming for the first time in years. Said she couldn't breathe, said her chest was heavy, said the bear was mad. The next morning I found it lying on her pillow again, box still shut, still locked. I stopped trying after that. Now I let it stay. I wash it, I keep it clean. I treat it like any other toy in her room, except I never touch it without reason, and I never press the button. It doesn't speak often anymore. Maybe once every few weeks, a garbled whisper, a cough of static. Sometimes late at night, I still hear that soft click from down the hall. I don't go check anymore. I just wait until it passes. Sometimes I wonder who left it there, who the little grave belonged to, if someone brought it to that spot for comfort or as an offering, if it was meant to stay. I think about that voice, not angry, not evil, just hurt. Why did you take him? I don't have an answer, and I think maybe that's the point. I always thought I'd hear it first, a door creak, a voice, something dramatic. But that night it wasn't sound that warned me. It was the chair. It turned on its own, slowly. And when I looked into the living room, it was already facing me, and I think someone, or something, is still sitting in it. I've always had a soft spot for old things. Not antiques exactly, just pieces with history. Scratches, worn edges, that faint smell of age. It makes them feel real, like they belonged to someone, and now they belong to me. That's how I ended up with the chair. I found it in this dusty little thrift store just off a back road near the edge of town. It was shoved into a corner behind a stack of lamps and cracked picture frames. A rocking chair made of dark wood, carved arms, faded upholstery with just enough wear to make it comfortable. The guy running the place said it had been dropped off months ago. No tag, no record of who brought it in. I didn't even hesitate. It felt like something my grandmother would have had, something that belonged near a window with soft light and a good book. I carried it home in the back of my truck and set it in the perfect spot, the living room corner, next to the window that caught the last bit of evening sun. The first few days it blended right in. I'd pass by it in the mornings, drop my bag near the door, sometimes glance at it when the light hit the wood just right. It didn't creak. It didn't move. It was just there. But I started noticing small things, tiny shifts. I'd come home and it wouldn't be quite where I left it. Not far, maybe a few inches off, angled just slightly toward the hallway instead of the window. At first I thought I was misremembering. I mean, who keeps track of a chair's exact position? Still, I started placing it more intentionally, aligning it with the edge of the rug, making sure the back legs were even with the baseboard. And every time I came back, it was different. Subtle, but different. The sound started about a week after I brought it home. Nothing dramatic, no thuds or footsteps, just a faint creak. A long, slow shift of old wood underweight. The kind of sound a rocking chair makes when someone leans forward in it, or leans back. At first I assumed it was settling. Old furniture does that, adjust to the room, the floor, the temperature. But what struck me was the timing. It only happened when I wasn't in the room. I'd be in the kitchen making coffee or brushing my teeth with the bathroom door half open. And there it was, that slow, dragging groan. Every time I went to check, it was still, completely still. So I started testing it. Before bed, I'd line it up perfectly with the corner of the rug. Back legs flush against the edge. I'd take a mental snapshot of the room, the angle of the light, the exact position of the chair. Then I'd go to sleep. The first night, I forgot all about it, until I got up around 2 a.m. to get a glass of water. I walked down the hallway, still half asleep, and stopped cold in the doorway. The chair had moved, not just shifted, turned. It was facing me, not the window, not the rug. It had rotated nearly 90 degrees, like someone had sat there and turned to watch the hallway, to watch me. I didn't say anything out loud, didn't even step into the room. I backed away and closed my bedroom door. The next day I told myself I'd bumped it somehow, that maybe I'd left it angled without noticing. I reset it, measured it this time, took a photo, and that night, it moved again. That was when I stopped sleeping properly. Every creak in the walls made me freeze. I'd lie in bed listening for movement, not footsteps, just that soft wooden groan that came from the living room when the house should have been silent. So one night I stayed up. I sat in the kitchen, lights off, just the dim hallway glow spilling across the floor. I could see part of the chair from where I was, the arms, the curve of the backrest. It sat perfectly still until just after 3 a.m. Then I heard it. A single, long creak. Slow. Deliberate. Like weight shifting forward. I leaned forward in my seat, holding my breath. The chair was still, but then it rocked, just once. Barely an inch of motion. A forward push, then back. Like something had shifted its posture. I wanted to believe it was wind, a vibration. But the windows were shut. No cars passed. The room was still. And yet, the chair had moved. The next night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat in the hallway with the lights off, just beyond the edge of the living room, close enough to see the chair clearly, far enough that I wouldn't be in the same space if it moved again. It sat there, still and ordinary, just a piece of old furniture near a window, and I watched it like you watch a live wire waiting for a spark. An hour passed. Nothing. But then, something shifted. Not the chair, not yet, just the room. The air felt heavier somehow, like I'd walked into a place where someone had just left, where their presence still clung to the walls. I leaned forward, barely breathing, eyes fixed on the backrest. And then I heard it. A low creak, drawn out and steady, like wood bending under slow weight. It rocked, just a few inches forward, then back. Not violently, not unnaturally. It moved like someone settling into comfort, the kind of movement you don't even notice when it's human. But this wasn't. I knew then it wasn't about the chair itself. It was about what used it. Because this time, I was looking right at it. There was no wind, no vibration, no trick of memory. That chair had moved, and it hadn't done it alone. My chest felt tight. My hands were cold. I kept watching, but nothing else happened, until it stopped moving. One final creak, short and dry, like someone leaning forward to rise, and then stillness. And just as I began to lean back, thinking it was over, I heard it. A breath. Soft. Quiet. But unmistakably close. Right behind me. Not in the room, not in the hallway, right behind me. I didn't turn. Couldn't. It wasn't the sound itself that paralyzed me. It was how close it was, like someone was inches from the back of my neck, calm, patient, present. I stayed like that, frozen, waiting for something. A whisper, a touch, a movement. But nothing came. Just that pressure behind me, and the chair in front of me, still facing forward. When the sun finally started bleeding through the blinds, I moved. Slowly, stiff. I turned my head, nothing behind me, but the chair. It had shifted again. Now it was turned fully toward the hallway, toward me, waiting. I didn't sleep the next night, or the one after. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that maybe I was overtired, maybe the chair creaked because the floor was uneven, or the temperature shifted at night. Or maybe I just imagined the breath behind me. But I couldn't lie to myself for long. The truth was, something had changed in that room, and the chair wasn't just furniture anymore. I stopped touching it, didn't sit in it, didn't even walk near it. I started leaving the living room lights on overnight, like that might keep it still, like whatever used it only moved in the dark. But some mornings I'd wake up and find it slightly out of place again, just a few inches off, just enough to remind me that it hadn't stopped. A few times I tried covering it with a blanket, thinking maybe if I couldn't see it, it couldn't do anything. But the next day, the blanket would be on the floor, neatly folded, always folded. I thought about dragging it outside, leaving it on the curb, but the idea made my stomach turn, like it wouldn't let me, like moving it would invite something worse. Now I keep the door to the living room shut. I don't look in at night, but I still hear it sometimes, a long, slow creak in the dark. Not every night, but enough. Always at the same hour. Always when I'm just starting to drift off. And when I do build up the courage to check, in the morning, with sunlight pouring in, the chair is always somewhere slightly different. Always turned just enough, like it had been facing something, or someone. I haven't had guests in months. I've stopped answering the phone. I barely leave the house. Because the worst part isn't the sound, or the movement, or even the breath behind me. It's the feeling that the chair isn't waiting to be sat in. It's that it already is. And whatever's sitting there doesn't want me to forget it. So I sent this to 7:31 a.m. in case someone out there's brought home something old, something with weight, something with memory. If you ever find a chair left behind in the corner of a store with no tag and no story, leave it there. Some things are empty for a reason. I woke up to the sound of footsteps moving across my hallway. Slow, deliberate, just outside my bedroom. When I opened the door, there was no one there, only the shoes, black leather, perfectly aligned, and facing me. I live alone. I've lived alone for years. I sent this story to 7:31 a.m. because I know how it sounds. I know most people won't believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me. Not if it hadn't happened in my own house. Not if I hadn't seen those soles covered in fresh mud on mornings I never stepped outside. This all started with a pair of secondhand shoes. They weren't haunted in the obvious way. No voices, no cold spots, no flickering lights. Just a slow, quiet presence that built itself into my life, night by night. And I don't think it's finished. I'd never been into thrift stores before this. Didn't like the idea of other people's stuff. furniture with stains you couldn't place, jackets that smelled like someone else's detergent. But that afternoon I had time to kill and wandered into this little consignment place off Route 9. I remember the air smelled like wood polish and old paperback glue, the kind of place with mismatched lamps and clocks that still ticked, even if none of them told the right time. That's where I saw the shoes, black leather, soft but structured, with this kind of 1950s shine. They looked expensive, real quality, not like something you'd find in a bin for $20, and they were sitting there on a clean section of the shelf, like someone had just polished them, set them down, and walked away barefoot. They were half a size small for me, but something about them felt deliberate, like they were waiting. I bought them without thinking twice, paid cash, didn't even try them on. I figured they'd be good for formal events or interviews I never really applied to. When I got home, I set them by the front door, towed to the wall, and left them there. I didn't even wear them. That night I made dinner, watched some reruns, and went to bed early. For the first few days I barely noticed anything. I'd walk past the shoes in the morning on my way to the kitchen, keys in hand, coffee half made. Sometimes one was turned slightly, angled like it had been bumped. I told myself I wasn't paying attention, probably nudged it coming in or out. I started leaving them more carefully, placing them heel to heel, exactly aligned. Even took a picture once just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. Still, every now and then I'd come home from work and they'd be off by a few inches, like they'd shifted weight, like they'd been stepped in. It wasn't enough to scare me, just enough to notice. A week went by before I noticed the soles. I was getting ready for work, already late, and glanced down as I grabbed my coat. There was dust clinging to the bottom of one shoe. Not just surface dust, but grit, like they'd been outside. I hadn't worn them once. I picked one up, turned it in my hand. The heel had a smudge, faint but there, like it had stepped in dry dirt, the kind that flakes off pavement when it hasn't rained in days. I checked my floor. Nothing. No trail, no mess, just that one mark. I wiped it off and told myself it must have been there when I bought them, but the next morning it was worse. This time both soles were streaked, not just dust but mud, dried in thin lines with tiny flecks of leaves pressed into the rubber edge, like they'd been walked through a trail. Not fresh, but recent enough that I should have seen something on the floor. And I didn't. I live in a second-floor apartment. No balcony, no pets, no one has keys but me. I cleaned them again, took a cloth, soap, even used a toothbrush around the heel. I placed them precisely, toe to toe, flush against the baseboard. I remember standing up, looking down at them one last time, like I was challenging them to move. That night I stayed up later than usual, left the hallway light on. I didn't even go into my bedroom, just sat in the living room, half watching TV, waiting to hear something. At some point after midnight I dozed off on the couch, and in the middle of that shallow, dreamless sleep, I heard it, a soft scuff. I opened my eyes. No sound now, just the quiet hum of the fridge. But the living room felt different, like someone had been in it while I was unconscious. I stood, walked slowly to the entryway. The shoes had moved, not far, just turned, both of them, slightly inward, like feet shifting their weight. I hadn't touched them, and the air felt colder near the door, like a draft had just passed through, even though the windows were shut tight. From that point on, I couldn't pretend anymore. Some mornings they were just misaligned. Other times I'd find one in the hallway, the other near the kitchen. Once I came home and one was tipped on its side, as if it had tripped, as if someone had actually walked in them. I started sleeping with the bedroom door closed, then locked, then barricaded, and still. I kept hearing it, the shuffle, the faint, deliberate weight of soles dragging across wood. Not every night, just enough to make me listen. I tried to convince myself it would pass, that maybe I was projecting things, feeding off stress or isolation. I left the shoes untouched, didn't clean them, didn't move them, didn't speak their existence out loud, just let them sit by the front door like furniture I didn't trust. Then came the night I really heard it. It started around 2:30 a.m. I remember because I'd just glanced at my phone. The apartment was silent, and then one step, soft but definite, a slow shift of weight, then another, not hurried, not hesitant, just walking. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. The sound came from the living room. A few seconds passed, then another step, slower now. Then a pause, long, like whoever it was had stopped to listen. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no alerts, just the glow of the screen against the bedroom wall. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Then it got closer. 3 more steps, heavier now. Not loud, but not possible either. My floor creaked in that way you only know if you've lived somewhere long enough, each board giving a little under pressure. I could trace every movement by sound alone. The steps entered the hallway. Then they stopped, right outside my door. I could hear my own heartbeat like it was pushing against my ears. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the base of the door, expecting to see a shadow, or light shift, or something. Instead, I heard the smallest sound yet. A scrape, leather brushing gently against the wood. Not a knock, not a kick. Just the sole of something pressing against the base of the door like it was testing it. The edge dragged once, then again. And then, nothing. No footsteps leaving. No breath, no motion. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move from the bed until daylight filled the room. When I finally opened the door, everything in me braced for the worst. No, for a broken lock, for an empty apartment, for something standing there waiting. But there was nothing. Except the shoes, lined up perfectly in front of the door, facing me, and the soles were wet, thick with fresh mud, bits of moss clinging to the edge like they'd been dragged through forest ground, and there were drops, tiny dark patches, leading up to them on the floor, but no trail going back, like someone had arrived and never left. I didn't throw them out. I don't know why. Maybe part of me was afraid of what might happen if I did, or maybe I just couldn't bring myself to touch them again. For a few days I avoided the front door entirely, used the back exit through the laundry room, kept the hallway light on 24/7. I stopped looking directly at them, just saw them in the corner of my vision, waiting, always facing the same direction. I thought about calling someone, a friend, a priest, a cleaner. But what would I say? That a pair of shoes was haunting me, that something walked around my apartment at night and then disappeared before morning. So I stayed quiet, worked from home, slept less, ate less. I'd catch myself glancing toward the door dozens of times a day just to make sure they hadn't moved, but they didn't. Not anymore. It was almost worse that way, because now it felt like they were waiting for me to do something. I considered burning them, thought about it for days, but something held me back. Not fear exactly, more like hesitation. Like throwing them away might not get rid of them, like they might come back, or worse, that whatever had been wearing them would come looking. So they're still here. Right now, they're in the hall closet, wrapped in an old towel, buried under blankets I never use, and I still hear things, sometimes, very faint. A soft weight shifting on wood, a dull pressure behind the wall, a subtle change in air, like someone just stepped out of view. Maybe I imagined all of it. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe it was stress or loneliness or something my mind built to give shape to a silence I couldn't explain. But every now and then, usually just before dawn, I wake up without reason, and I swear I hear them just outside the door. You're still listening to 7:31 a.m. If anything strange in your house starts whispering tonight, maybe, just maybe, you brought the wrong thing home. Sleep tight. Want more transmissions like this? Tune in again. Like, subscribe, and keep the frequency locked.